For about 2 years of my life, in my early 20s, I was obsessed with World of Warcraft.
I think it's a pretty good plan. We should be able to pull it off this time. What do you think, Abdul? Can you give me a number crunch real quick?
Yeah, give me a sec. I'm coming up with 32.33, repeating of course, percentage of survival.
Oh, that's a lot better than we usually do.
Alright, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Dragons!
Oh my god, he just ran in. Save him!
Oh geez, stick to the plane!
Oh Jesus, let's go.
For those of you who aren't familiar with it, World of Warcraft, or WoW, is a massive multiplayer online role-playing game, and at its peak in around 2010 it had 12 million subscribers. It's actually been around since 2004, so it's 20 years old now. I first started playing the game around about 2005, and at that time I was a second year English literature student at university, and even though World of Warcraft nearly cost me my degree, I wouldn't have exchanged the experience for the world. And despite it being loads of fun, one of the other benefits was it taught me some things about leadership. No, seriously, it did. So in this video, I'm going to share with you the leadership skills I learned whilst playing World of Warcraft, and how I applied those skills in the real world when I became a manager of a team of data analysts. Now, if the combination of data and fantasy role-playing appeals to you, then check out my quiz. There's a link in the description box down below. It's called Who's Your Data-Based Fantasy Role-Playing Character? It's heaps of fun, and you will learn something about your data profile, including your key challenges when you take the quiz. If you're new to this channel, this is Datacasts. My name's Lee Durbin, and I help data practitioners break free of spreadsheets and advance their analytical careers. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Okay, so I'm not ashamed to say that I was a guild leader in World of Warcraft. For the uninitiated, what this means is that I effectively was leading a group of around 50 to 100 players, and we would regularly raid dungeons together, and there would be about 25 of us who would be raiding these dungeons, taking down bosses to claim new gear, new weapons, new armor, and so on. Defeating these bosses required some serious coordination between the 25 of us, and each boss had its own unique set of strategies to defeat. Now, my guild consisted of a lot of Scandinavian players, and although their spoken and written English was excellent, English wasn't actually their first language, so it was easy for something I said to be misinterpreted. But without a clear understanding of our roles and responsibilities during these raids, there was no way that we could take down these bosses. We had to work together and we had to understand each other to make that happen. I quickly learned that issuing clear instructions at the start of the boss fight was crucial to success. I would read up on the strategy beforehand, and then I would sort of give a summary of the approach to the group before we initiated the fight. I never assumed that anybody else had read up on the strategy, even though I asked that they did, and I made sure that there was time for them to ask questions before we started, especially if there were newer players within the raid. So later on, when I managed a team of data analysts, issuing clear instructions was one of the most important things that I had to do as a manager. So even though we did have a Kanban in our team and we had cards with the work that we were doing, I still summarized that work and made sure that everybody was on the same page, that we were all striving towards the same goals. And I would make sure that there was plenty of time for the team to ask questions as well, in case there was any uncertainty. And here's another commonality between my guild leader experience in WoW and my managerial experience leading a team of data analysts. I was never prescriptive. So in our WoW raids, we would have tanks who would make sure that the enemies stayed occupied and didn't attack the other players. We would have healers who would keep the tanks and the rest of the team alive. They would heal them. We would also have ranged DPS. So these were typically things like mages and hunters that would be attacking the enemies from afar. And then we had melee DPS, and they would be more kind of up close to the enemies and attacking them with weapons. So we had all these different classes with different roles. I actually was a healer, but I wasn't explaining to the tanks how to tank or to the DPSs how to DPS. DPS, by the way, means damage per second. I realise I'm starting to use some acronyms already. I trusted the team and I assumed that they knew what they were doing, so even though I would summarise the specific strategies for the boss that we were facing, I wouldn't tell them how to play their specific role within that. I just made sure that they understood how to work with the rest of the team and certain key things that they may need to be aware of as the fight progressed. The team of data analysts that I led also had their own unique strengths and weaknesses, and I wouldn't tell them how to do their jobs. It was my role as a manager to make sure that they understood what it was they needed to do, what was the overarching goal, to make sure that the team worked well together, that they were able to collaborate and they were conscious of any major impediments, and to sort of work behind the scenes to remove any blockers so that there was nothing preventing them from progressing. In both cases, in WoW and in management, I trusted the team, and it worked. So running a guild in WoW was kind of like a part-time job, and one of my responsibilities was to recruit new players into the guild. In some ways this actually operated like a standard recruitment process, so we had an application form on our message board, and players would answer a bunch of questions about their avatar, about the character that they were playing, as well as sort of their ambitions, what they were looking to get out of playing the game within our guild. And if we liked their answers in the application form, then we would reach out to them for a chat. In other words, we interviewed them. These interviews would actually happen within the game itself, so we would arrange somewhere to meet, and we would have a conversation either over the voice chat or just through the in-game messaging. When we met in the game, we would sort of check out their gear and weaponry to see if they were sort of up to spec. Sometimes we might go on a raid together, so in WoW you could do 5-person and 10-person raids as well as the bigger 25-person ones, so you could get together as like a small group and see how they handled that situation. If things went smoothly, so if they performed well in the 5-person or 10-person raid and we were happy with what they were saying as we talked to them, then I'd have a conversation with my guild officers, so that would be like a small group of us of about 4 or 5 who were sort of the more dependable people in the guild. We would have a chat together, discuss the candidate, and if we were all in agreement, then we would invite them to join the guild on a trial basis. During the many months that I was leading the guild, I never recruited anybody that we had to then subsequently kick out. Everybody got along. And one of the main reasons for that, I think, is because I put more stock into their personality, into who they were, than I did in their skills. In other words, their personality mattered more to me than their gaming prowess. Of course, it was important that they were able to make a contribution to the raid, so a healer needed to heal, a tank needed to make sure that the enemies didn't attack the rest of the team, the DPS needed to take the enemy down quickly. But that really was less important to me than how easy it was to get along with the person behind the avatar. After all, we could train less able players, but you can't train an arsehole out of being an arsehole. Now, I've either been a hiring manager or I have assisted hiring managers during the recruitment process several times over the last few years, and I've taken a similar approach. I'm actually more interested in the person than I am in the person's skills and what it is that they bring in from a technical perspective. That stuff still matters, but really I'm interested in who are they, what can they bring to the team as a person. And so the sort of questions in my head that I'm thinking as I'm interviewing the candidate would be, is this person aware of their own limitations and are they willing and eager to learn? Does this person appear to be answering honestly? Does this person have a bit of a sense of humour? Is this person prepared to face new challenges with potentially limited guidance? We had a strong team in our guild. We didn't progress as far into the game as many of us would have liked to have, but we had great fun, and that's really what it's all about. So during the months that I was leading a guild in World of Warcraft, I was also studying for a Master's in English Literature. Raiding dungeons in WoW was quite a serious commitment, so we would spend 3, 4, maybe even 5 hours at a time in the raid in the evenings, and that would be 2, 3, 4 times a week. But then you also had to spend time between the raids gathering resources to create potions or to create sort of other items that you may need to use during the raid. And if you didn't have these sorts of items, then you wouldn't perform as well during the raid, and so you'd be sort of letting the team down. You could also do PvP, or player versus player, so this is when you have two teams that are fighting against each other for prized loot, so sort of capture the flag type situations. All in all, there were many days where I played WoW for about 12 hours per day. This was partly because I genuinely really enjoyed playing in the game, but I also felt a sense of obligation towards my fellow guildmates. If I didn't put the time in to keep the show running, then the raids either wouldn't go ahead or they wouldn't go ahead very well. The guildmates wouldn't have such a good time, and then they would probably start leaving the guild, and then they wouldn't be able to raid anymore unless they could get maybe into another guild. So to you, this might sound completely nuts. Why would anybody spend 12 hours a day playing a video game for really nothing in return? And it's true, it is kind of nuts, and the madness of the situation really hit me as I was approaching the deadline for my master's thesis. I'd sort of done bits and pieces of research. I kind of had a good idea of what it was that I was going to write about, but I hadn't written a word, and I had 2 weeks left before the deadline to submit the thesis. And we're talking about a 20,000 word thesis here on John Milton, 17th century literature, kind of heavy stuff. For some reason that to this day I still don't understand, I decided to handwrite the entire thing, so I then had to allow an extra day or two at the end to then type it all up. The thing was littered with typos, but miraculously I managed to get it in on time, and I got a distinction. This taught me that if I really put the time into the work, then I could produce really good things. But it would mean balancing my WoW time with my real world commitments. The stuff that actually matters. So over the next few months I started playing WoW less and less, the guild disbanded, and by the end of 2008 I wasn't playing WoW at all. It was good while it lasted. Good leadership means understanding where to focus your energies. It means that you shouldn't be spending too much time on one thing just because you really happen to enjoy doing that one thing, especially if your time is needed elsewhere. And you might realise that the thing that you really thought you needed to spend a lot of time on isn't actually all that important anyway. I loved my time playing WoW. I met some great people along the way. It was heaps of fun, and I genuinely learned some things about leadership that I only really came to appreciate later in life when I was actually managing a team. It taught me lessons about leading a group of people, about issuing clear instructions, recruiting the right people into the team and making sure that I can retain them, and balancing my priorities. There's obviously no substitute for real-world experience, but in today's world, which is far more online, work is far more virtual now than it was when I started playing WoW back in the mid-2000s. I think there are genuine skills that you can pick up from playing these large open-world games where you're collaborating with other players on a common goal. And I think that's easy to dismiss if you haven't been immersed in these games, but I think there is something to it. Just maybe don't do it for 12 hours a day. Anyway, don't forget to take my quiz, give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.